Oh, your neighbors must love you.
Yeah, not so much.
Alright guys, welcome back to the Wackadoo Racing channel. Got something special for you today. Episode number 2. Something that, well, we're taking a lot of pride in. Something we want to let you guys know about. I'm going to show you right here. Take a look at this.
No. Not that one. That's for another day. Today, we're covering my 1968 Triumph GT6 Motor Swap Turbo. Now, I recognize that this car is a little bit of a source of controversy, especially amongst the Triumph enthusiasts. That being said, I'm expecting some negative comments. If you leave them, I'm going to go ahead and just delete them because we don't need the negativity. However, I've gotten a lot of them on my personal page where I have a motor swap video of how I got this motor into the car. So I'm going to leave a link in the description if you're looking for more information about it, but it is a very boring video that's mostly logistics and very little entertainment. But for everyone else, I hope you enjoy it.
So it's a 1968 Triumph GT6. Makes it a Mark 1?
There's a Mark 1. So this car was available across the year span that it was produced in Mark 1, 2, and 3 based on what year range it was built. So nice. This is a Mark 1.
What did it come with from Triumph factory in 68?
So this car, it has a very unique racing heritage, and that's kind of why this car is a controversial car that I've modified. Really based around that straight 6. So the motor in itself that was in this car originally was a fantastic motor. It was a 2-liter cast iron cam-in block straight 6, and it produced 95 horsepower, which for its time, considering GM's 4-liter at the same time frame was only making 150, it was a really fantastic motor that produced a lot of power for its size. For what I wanted to do, it didn't turn out to be what I wanted to use. So I ended up swapping it. But ultimately, I got this car from Northern Washington from a guy named Doug, who I still keep in contact with. And somewhere in the 80s, it had a dash fire that ultimately debilitated the car. Last license plate, the last tags that were on the license plate were from 96. So somewhere at some point, somebody tried to do something with it. But after 96, it's kind of a miss until 2018 when I took over the project.
Nice. And speaking of motor swap, why don't we just get to the elephant in the room here?
Go ahead and just take a look at that.
Let's just take a little look-see under the skirt here. What do we got? Oh, that's pretty. What do we got? We're looking at a BP1.8 out of a Miata?
This is a BP1.8 out of an NB series Miata. So this one came out of a 2000. Obviously, we've added a turbo. This is a CX Racing T3 T4 6364. We run a CX Racing intercooler as well, and the factory radiator, and We use a Mega Squirt PNP2 for the ignition. It's been a really stout and reliable combination in this configuration.
So with it boosted, we know this thing comes factory with about $140 to the wheel.
Correct.
So where are you at right now boosted?
On this tune, which is a very conservative tune for trying to preserve the longevity of the motor when we're actually putting it through its paces heavily at the track and things of that nature, we've got it on a conservative 10 psi tune, and that renders 215 horsepower at 192 foot-pounds of torque.
So now riddle me this. There was a little rumor that went around when you first installed the turbo on this thing and took it to the dyno, pre-clutch, first base pull, what did it end up doing? What was the actual number? Because I've heard a few different ones.
So right out the gate, while they were still doing a preliminary run before they'd ever touched any of the fuel maps, they just wanted to get a baseline. The car accidentally dynoed 260 tire right out the gate. And the clutch wasn't going to last very long at that point. And ultimately, I didn't want to hang out around that horsepower level anyways, once again, for the longevity of the engine. So at the 215 that it's at now, it puts it about 250 flywheel, which this motor can do all day pretty reliably. So I didn't see any need to go much more than that. For what we're doing, much more power than that might become hard to get to the ground. So I like it at this level, and it feels really good where it's at. But there is a lot more potential in it if we decide to do something later down the road to get more out of it.
Well, and speaking of potential, you did the what? Flying Miata Stage 1 clutch?
It's got a Flying Miata Stage 1 clutch. I think that's good for 300 horse, and it uses the factory Mazda 5-speed, and then we're using an ACT slightly lightened flywheel. So it gets out of its own way just fine, particularly because of the weight of the car.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So one thing I'm noticing up here, though, I mean, we're bow tie guys here in this garage, but clearly no love for the LS on this one?
No, and that's something that I get a lot, is there's a couple of misconceptions there. People see with the bonnet being flipped toward the hood that there's a lot of room in the engine bay, there's a lot of accessibility here. It's kind of an illusion. It looks like there's lots of room, but with the way the fenders come down and the radius of the tires and everything, it would be a tight fit without having to completely demolish the hood, which is very difficult to replace, actually. But the main thing is I wanted to maintain the sporting feel of the car. I wanted a certain amount of power to go with this weight so that it would feel sporty, darty, and nimble, and I wasn't fighting the traction the entire time I drove it. A lot of the cars that we see that are the most functional at the autocross track utilize their power efficiently. There's not any tire spin. They put the power down, they use it. An LS, yeah, it'd be cool, but it would not be efficient. We'd be smoking the tires off and be modulating throttle the entire time to try and keep the car on the track instead of just drifting it the whole time. So with this power plant, we also cut 250 pounds out of the front of the car, which obviously comes off the entire weight of the car in total. Car weighs 1,920 pounds, and that's enough for me. More motor, more weight, too much power for our application.
Yeah, makes total sense. Oh man, so looking at the outside, look at the exterior of this thing, you got a lot of stuff going on. I mean, so, it keeps a lot of the factory body lines, but you've added some of your own touches. Let's talk about them. Give me a breakdown.
And that's one of the main things that people have a grievance with, is they think that the way that this car was from the factory should never be modified. And in my opinion, I wanted it to be something else for my own personal build. I can understand I'm not trying to convince anyone else to do theirs my way, but for me, I wanted it to be my own a bit more. So I started with the front valence. I added a small splitter just to get some of that air force down underneath the front. It's based on the factory valence with a splitter added. That way, if while we're autocrossing we end up eating a cone and damaging it, I can replicate it. I can build that again without having to put in too much labor. Obviously, we've gone to a projector style headlight. The reason for that is it's just a drivability thing. It's much easier to see with an LED style headlight driving at night. It's already sketchy enough. You're small and hard to see. This makes it so I can at least see what's in front of me. The hood louvers are from a late model Mustang GT. And the motivation there was just to try and extract some of that heat from the oversized radiator, the intercooler, and obviously the turbo produces an enormous amount of heat.
Right, and with it being technically a low pressure zone on the car, it'll help pull some of that heat away from the motor. When
the car is sitting and the fans kick on, you can definitely see the heat coming out of the vents.
Yeah, it looks like you did some flares on it too.
Yeah, the factory wheels were, I believe, 13 by 6s. These are a 15 by 8, and we're running a 205 tire. So obviously we flared the front end to try and accommodate that. I think that's a plus 35 offset. So it does poke out pretty good. So I like the aesthetic of the flare. I intended on doing that from the very beginning, so I had no qualms with adding those.
Right. Looks like you got the rear done a little bit too. That had to be hard.
Yeah, we were able to flare the factory steel on the rear of the car. That'll all be smoothed out later when we start doing body work on this car.
Body work, schmoddy work. So, is that a NASCAR style little Lexan spoiler you got off the back too?
Yeah. Just to try and break up some of that air on the back end. And then obviously we've got a diffuser underneath the rear of the car. The car feels extremely stable at triple digit and above. It's hard to say if everything's functioning exactly how it's supposed to without putting the car in a wind tunnel. But there are ways that we can test the aerodynamics and what I've modified. At a later date, we're probably going to do that. But for now, I just know the car feels stable at highway speeds.
Yeah. You took perfectly good wing windows, threw knock-a-ducks in it, and then you added a fancy little roof scoop as well. What's the story behind all this stuff?
So this car in the summer, we're in Southern California, and it's regularly in the summer more than 100 degrees. This car is basically a keg with a turbo strap to it. It gets insanely hot inside of it. Trying to get airflow into the cab in any way is important. Originally, the knock-a-ducts were going to be run to a trans cooler, potentially a diff cooler, if not brake ducting or anything else that we thought we want to try and get some more air to. But in its current configuration, the car actually generates very little heat from most of those components. However, the interior of the car does get remarkably hot. So the scoop itself on the roof does run to a set of AC style vents so that they can be directed to the driver and passenger. And right now we're just letting the knock-a-ducts vent air into the car. Some track events require you to run with the windows up, and that would be absolutely brutal without something creating some type of cabin pressure. So for now, it's all about trying to get air moving in the car.
Yeah, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't ridden in the passenger seat of this car. With the windows down, you would expect it to suck some of that air in through the windows themselves, but because of the body lines and the aero from the factory, it doesn't.
Not very much air actually comes in the open windows. And the wing windows don't do nearly as much as a single knock-a-duct can. So they do move a pretty substantial amount of air.
Yeah, it makes total sense, man. So let's take a look at the interior components. It looks like, I know for a fact you got some custom stuff going on, some trick components. But this one was shining to me earlier when we were walking around. What do we got back here?
So this is a relatively simple solution to a need. This car would have been packaged with an available rear seat, although it was pretty much useless, and most people saw that and didn't package it out, to my understanding. But the back deck would have folded down, and you could have put an extremely small child in the back of the car. Mine was never packaged with that, and therefore the back deck is just a soundboard. My speakers go in it, and I throw dog food on it. But the wood deck itself is obviously a faux cover. It's a little bit higher than the factory deck would have been there, but it covers up the 12-gallon fuel tank, the battery, and all of the emission systems that would have been run originally on the Mazda motor. this car is actually still capable of being scanned for OBD2. So all of the stuff that was smog equipment for the Mazda engine is in its original orientation that would have been found on a Mazda in this car. So with that being said, if I have problems with the running gear of this car, I can go onto the forums and I can ask the question and frame them as if I was still working on a Miata, and I'd still know what I was trying to find, where those parts would be oriented in the car. So if I asked, hey, where will I find the charcoal canister for this car? And they said, oh, on a 2000 Miata, it would be underneath the right rear tire fender. That's where it is here still.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. You think this thing would still pass smog if it needed to?
Yeah, not with the turbo.
Well, obviously
not. Not with the turbo, but it probably could have before we swapped it in.
Well, California's dumb anyways. Stupid turbo laws. Let's crack the doors on this thing and actually take a look at the interior, because this is pretty tricky. Probably one of my favorite parts of the whole car. Tons of custom panel work. Give us the rundown. What's the deal with the dash? It's clearly not factory.
So the factory dash in this car is a real source of pride amongst Triumph enthusiasts. It would have been a really nice, subtle wooden dash. I think it was walnut or something to that effect. And then, although it was beautiful, mine was destroyed when I got the car. With that in mind, I'm a metal fabricator. So metal is far more in my wheelhouse. I appreciate the look of metal more. An associate of mine was able to laser cut this dash for me, and we went crazy with the rivet gun. And I liked the style of it. This is kind of what I was looking for from the very beginning, and I'm really happy with how it turned out.
Did you hand rivet all those? No pneumatics?
No, all hand riveted the hard way.
God, you're a savage.
And then every inch of the car has been on the panels has been hand spun on a manual mill.
Did a little bit of bead roll work too. Did you spin all these by hand?
Yep.
Goodness. Yeah. And everything spun. The dash, door panels, everything spun. God, you're a monster. What's this racing wheel you got going on here?
So that's an Aluminum Joe's racing wheel. I did not make that, but it suited the theme of the car. I loved the look of it, and it did take, although marginal, a little bit more weight out of the car.
So there's one final thing.
And obviously the Querque seats help with that as well.
Oh yeah, you got the Querque seats.
Yeah, they're these are the 419 series. They're a bit wider than the standard Querques. I'm obviously a bigger guy, and I wanted to still be able to ride in the car with my seatbelt on while wearing a big jacket in the winter, and these seats more than accommodate that.
What in the world is this Franken Shifter?
So the Dr. Seuss shifter is once again, it was a solution to a problem. The Mazda transmission is about 9 inches longer from the factory shift location in the Triumph transmission. So with the bolstering on these seats where my arm would sit, I would end up with the shifter basically in my forearm, and I would have to reach really awkwardly down to try and reach it. So the S-shaped shifter puts the shift ball further out where that I can actually put my hand on it comfortably and in a pretty natural position, and it does not inhibit the shift pattern of the car at all. If you're not looking at it, it feels exactly like any other shifter. It's very similar to the way that a lot of times they modify the shifter for the Shelby Cobras to try and get that shift point further forward.
That makes sense. It doesn't mess with the turret at all. It just natural feel.
Nope, it feels like any other shifter.
Huh. That's awesome, man. It's a beautiful car. Gotta love all the detail, all the meticulous little details that go into it. There's nothing that you won't catch everything the first time you look at it. There's all kinds of little things that are so awesome about this car. Everything shines through. Once you've taken a walk around it enough, you get a really solid view of the whole thing in its entirety.
Obviously, this isn't going to be the only video of this car we do, and it's hard to try and cover how all these things went into place, where they're at, what I've done, and why I did it. So if there's something that you guys see that you have more questions about, feel free to let us know in the comments, and we can try and address them more in depth at a later date. But ultimately, we're just trying to give you a baseline of what this car is all about, and we can always go into more depth later.
All right, D, so you've told us what it was, what it has, and what you've done. What's next?
So for this car, the entire motivation behind putting this car together, finding it, and starting this build was I wanted to retire my 69 Chevelle from autocross work. I've got other priorities with that car right now, and I really don't want to keep beating on her on the autocross track, and I wanted something that was more serviceable, more affordable, lighter, nimbler, and generally speaking, smaller, so that it would have a better opportunity to be competitive for that type of racing. So we got to get this thing to the track. Now, I have been having some issues with the rear axles. Now, it's got a built rear end in it. However, the axles themselves have been a little bit problematic. I'm working with some manufacturers for a more permanent solution, but not coming up with any die-hard answers just yet. So for now, I've got a temporary solution that we're going to be utilizing. It's not the right way, but it is the way we're going to have to do it. For now. At least that way we can go to Cars and Coffee and local car shows and things of that nature. But the next goal is to try and get something stable enough, solid enough that we can go do track work and see what it's all about, because this car has never been to the track, and we still have to do a lot of sorting and shakedown to make sure that it is what we want to do, so that we can start adjusting and addressing some of those other issues that come to light during track work. All right, Cody, they've listened to me long enough. Give us an outro.
All right, well, that's it for this one. So, thanks for... All right, guys, that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for hanging out with us, going over Project Bronson. We got a lot of stuff coming. We got the 472 being built, getting thrown into Hidalgo out back. That's the ramp truck. We also got an update on Cerberus coming in the near future. We got more stuff on Blitz with the motor swap and the trends and everything that we're doing with that, along with Uncle Sam down the line, probably end of the year. So we got a lot of stuff coming. If you like what we're doing, if you like what you're seeing, give us a like, maybe subscribe. If you do subscribe, hit that little bell wherever it is. That'll tell you when we post new videos. So keep hanging out with us. Hope you guys are enjoying the video. Let us know what you think. Leave us some comments. Till next time, Wackadoo out.